the idea that the ANC will rule until Jesus Christ comes back has expired. And this is a troika that runs this country, which is big business, ANC and the DA. The US asks you to do something. If you don't do that thing, or behave in a manner that satisfies the Americans, they'll set the dogs on you.
What do you make of President Ramaphosa's time in office?
Ramaphosa, on any level, is unsuitable to be the president of this country.
Wow. Spread the fire. Welcome back to SMWX. And today I'm very excited to be joined by political and governance analyst Sandile Swana. He's well known for his views on South African politics as he decodes all the complexity that's happening in front of our political eyes. Mr. Swana has been requested on this channel many times for many years, and I finally managed to track him down. Thanks for joining us, sir.
Thank you, Sizwe.
It's a great
Glad
pleasure.
to be here.
It's a great pleasure to have you. It feels like it's been a long time in the making. How do you firstly interpret the 2024 election? This is something I've been asking a lot of our guests because I feel like as a country, we haven't fully interpreted the earthquake that happened last year in our politics. How are you thinking about it nearly a year on?
I think, first of all, I must say this, that at the start of this democracy in 1994, my view was that we need a multi-party government. I did not have confidence from the start that a single party, whether that party would have been the mass of the National Party, we already knew about it. Whether the African National Congress alone could actually deliver what was required. So my first interpretation, looking at the election results and the trend leading to the collapse of the electoral base of the ANC, because they were getting less and less votes in their favor. The economy was going down steadily over time, certainly since 2009. So from that point of view, I think that whether you're looking at the constitutional architecture of the country, which favors the smaller parties, by the way, because, So, and now what it does, I think it actually just generally favors smallness, because we're now a conglomeration of smaller parties. So that would be the first thing that I would say about what happened there. Then, obviously, some people anticipated the opportunity. I think that the business community, big business more specifically, as opposed to black business, white big business, what some call white monopoly capital.
Yeah.
And the white political parties, more specifically the DA, anticipated that something was going to happen. And then the question was, how do you leverage your smallness and create some form of bigness out of it? And I think they were far better prepared than the African National Congress and the black political parties, including the EFF and the MK, if we can put it that way, for the scenario that unfolded. On the 28th of May, 2024, the elections were on the 29th, but on the 28th of May, and I must say that I didn't read that correctly, when this group, whether you call them BUSA or BLSA, that whole conglomeration of white monopoly capital over there, made a statement, a written statement, they published it, that they wouldn't like to see the new coalition before we cast the votes on the 29th. But they wouldn't like a coalition, in essence, where MK and EFF are included. In terms of my understanding of the political history of this country, I anticipated that, call them the comrades, EFF, MKP and ANC would be able to form their own coalition. What I underestimated and misread was the smell of money in the air. And in consequence of that, the coalition that was actually formed was the one that was prescribed, in my judgment, on the 28th of May, more than what our experience and history would have told us would happen. So, and I believe that till today, that is where we are now. A government that is by and large, largely controlled by big business, and driven by a certain agenda of privatization of various kinds, etc., etc. So that is where we are. So certainly the idea that the ANC will rule until Jesus Christ comes back has expired.
Yeah,
Clearly proven wrong, and the comrades, generally speaking, are on slippery slopes, and if they are not on the back foot, and it's a very tough situation for the comrades. Yes.
Yeah, absolutely. It's interesting that you take us back to those days before the election. I would also highlight the days when we started getting the results. There seemed to be a very coordinated strategy to say MK, EFF, ANC is doomsday, and we need this. Back then it was we need the ANC-DA coalition. It later morphed into the GNU, but there was a very coordinated effort to set the agenda soon after the election results, which I think maybe surprised and put the other parties which weren't as ready on the back foot.
Yes, no. There's a lot of things that some of us, because, sometimes history and tradition can blind you. Because I spoke to one of the ANC veterans, and he told me that from their perspective, whatever your boundaries are of ANC veterans, that they want the DA to come in. With the ANC.
Wow.
And that was actually a little while before I could fully anticipate the impact MKP would have, for instance, because that MKP became a major issue in the elections.
Yeah.
So there are comrades who had come to a conclusion, senior comrades who had come to a conclusion that it is now time to salvage whatever can be salvaged by introducing the DA into this. Whether they themselves knew what the DA is exactly, it's another story. Because, African history is so tough because I'm talking whether you look at the past 400 years, then one group would even run to the colonizers to be assisted to fight another group of brothers.
True.
And then later on, when you finish fighting your brothers, they turn on you and finish all of you. So that is more or less where we are. And obviously people have had personal bitternesses and all sorts of things that confuse the actual political questions of the time. And we have not worked through that. So you can see the fiasco that is going on right now.
Yeah. Do you think the ANC took the wrong decision?
Okay. Let's talk about their terminology, maybe.
Sure.
Let's put it like that.
Sure.
Their terminology is that they are forming a GNU. To me, when you are forming a GNU, let alone the prescripts of under what conditions must you form a GNU. Let's just talk numbers. To me, you would simply say, guys, you have X percentage, therefore in the cabinet, this is your number of seats.
Yeah.
Right?
Sure.
So the seats in the cabinet are divided according to that. So that's the first thing.
Yeah.
So I think just on numbers alone, many people would tell you that this cannot be a GNU because it doesn't reflect what the voters said. Because there's a large percentage of votes that is not accounted for in how the GNU was formed.
Absolutely.
So then the other problem, whether the ANC made a mistake or not, is I think that there's something we need to consider, all of us. This we can take back to the period before 1994, right? How did the Congress guys, the ANC, UDF guys, look upon the Azapo PAC guys? What was their stance before 1994? You can take that argument even to SWAPO in Namibia, and I have a view on this. My view is this. When we would interact with the SWAPO comrades, they had this statement, and it took me time to understand this statement, that SWAPO is the sole authentic representative of the people of Namibia. Now, a statement like that cannot possibly be true, to be the sole authentic representative of the people of Namibia.
Yeah.
When we went to the Conference for a Democratic Future in 1989, I think it was towards the end of 89, to adopt the Harare Declaration here in South Africa. People like me were on the side of the Congress. But I think there was a sense that the ANC is now, obviously the people who are in senior positions, is not only going to swallow up the black political parties, PAC, ASAPO, and all of them, under one banner of this senior leader. In the process of time, I think I remember talking to somebody just in an informal setting when, for instance, the ANC was inviting the NP later on to join the ANC, however they came to that arrangement. Then Steve Chwet apparently was talking to these fellows, and then they asked him, is it not dangerous for you to be absorbing the NP into your organization? And Steve took out his hand. If you can put a sword of soil, a sword.
Yeah.
You know. And it says, "Zobasumza." In other words, you'll just crush them like this. So you are being absorbed, not to be built up and developed into a proper ANC cadre. The aim is to finish these guys off. Now, I'm saying all of that to come to this point. That could it be that when we go into government, we have this idea that there must be some uniformity of thought. In other words, if you are in the GNU right now, as we speak, your ideas, by and large, at the end of the day, must be subordinated to the ANC. But I think the same idea applies to the DA. I think the DA is not a party that necessarily wants to be in a multi-party government or coalition. They want you to be there, and they want you to subordinate yourself to their ideas. That is why they even clash with people like Freedom Front Plus, and then you find these coalitions breaking up. These two parties, to my mind, have not understood that South Africa has got many groups of people and many ideas. You have the Khoi people, you have the San people, you have communists, you have socialists, you have Catholics. So how are you going to have this sole authentic representative of the people? Where are these ideas going to go to that are there? So to me, the idea of plurality or pluralism in the cabinet, in parliament, in society, for these two biggest parties remains a problem. And in conclusion to that, I would say even the so-called factions and divisions in the ANC are caused by this idea that once you think your faction is a little bit stronger, we must all just simply subordinate ourselves to you. And there's a line of march and everybody must follow that. So to me, it's not so much whether the decision of the ANC was right or wrong to partner with the DA, but whether the partnership that was formed represents actually a fair representation of the ideas of South Africans, no matter how difficult it is to enter into debates with all these people. But they are legitimate South Africans, and they need to be given proper space and time to be listened to and to be attended to.
How do you think the GNU has performed so far, given all that happened in the election, and how unprepared in many ways South Africa was for the shock election result?
So the first thing that you can commend the GNU for, is that they are still together.
Sure.
The GNU is still there. Nobody has resigned or pulled out or anything in any significant way.
There were some people predicting it wouldn't last a few months.
One of them.
Oh, really? Fair.
Right. So, big business, the ANC and the DA, those three in particular, have held it together. On the side of performance, because if you remember the letter of that publication of the 28th of May, they listed some of the things that are going to be delivered. It was business listing these things. So the fixing of Transnet and the railways, that sort of thing, fixing of Eskom and so on and so forth. They listed, and then that they've deployed their resources and have been working with the ANC government up to that point to deliver these things. And if the ANC were to go into coalition with the EFF and MK, they would then pull out they would withdraw their resources. So my expectation as I sit here, although we have not been given a detailed report by BUSA or BLSA and all these people, for instance, we don't know how many managers and engineers, technicians they've deployed at Eskom or at Transnet and so on. It's just once in a while you see one guy, Adrian Gore, making statements together with the president. So by and large, this is a troika that runs this country, which is big business, ANC and the DA. That's the troika that runs this country.
The tripartite alliance.
Yeah, of a special type. Now, so that is where they are. So now the question is, if then that's what they said, this is the basis of this thing in terms of tangibles. I think that they have overpromised and underdelivered on Eskom. People are in and out of load shedding even now. There's a big celebration that one of the units at Kusile has come online. But probably if you check the records, you'll probably find that they took 2.5 times the allocated time to actually finish that project. And the budget was all over the show. Quality has been in question. These things should have been finished long ago. So they are competencies that they claim, because their selling card is that the private sector comes with extraordinarily superior competencies. That's why a guy can be paid in 1 year a bonus of 300 million at a go. Because they bring extraordinary superhuman skills to anything they do. So that is in question. Right now, up to the end of this financial year, it's still going to be a struggle to resolve the freight rail questions that remain.
We haven't seen any major improvements.
So it's still a question. There's a lot of noise with a passenger rail. But we are not yet having full confirmation that for instance, the labor force is stored in Soweto. That there is full coverage. Somebody said there'll be a train every 10 minutes, all things like that. I don't know if that is physically happening. But the net figure of it is that the first figures that have come out, unemployment has continued growing. The GDP growth at 0.6 is dismal, actually. You can't get 1%. With all these big brains apparently from business that are there. So if we're talking numbers, they have not done a good job of it. I suppose we may talk about it later, but our foreign relations are two countries. Helen Zille and Steenhuisen are representing their own South Africa. Lamula and Ramaphosa, they are representing their own country. And demonstrating serious amateurish behavior, very amateurish. So from my perspective, and it would be unfair at this juncture, but many people do not know that black education in South Africa in these 30 years has actually largely deteriorated. And with that, the economic status of black people has deteriorated, more especially if you consider their ability and necessity to produce independent income. As a family or as an individual, that you can produce an independent, that is not there. So unemployment has grown. You can actually form a country with a number of people that are unemployed in South Africa.
Yeah. No, it's a sobering reflection, because I think a lot of the GNU has basically been built off of PR and hopes and hype. But when you look at the hard numbers, there's not a lot to commend the GNU so far. Things haven't gone backwards terribly either, but they certainly haven't been going forwards.
Yes. On that note, Susan, we do need, and the comrades must look at the numbers honestly, with great honesty. Yesterday, I was involved in the seminar with the Black Management Forum.
Right.
And we're discussing, in Northwest, discussing the budget of the Northwest. Now, and I'm saying to the BMF, you guys now need to go and do your own private homework now with this document. Because my problem with this document is that in each budget item, they don't say this is the baseline, this is where we are, or this is the amount of backlog that is there. After we've spent this 4 billion, the backlog will reduce by this amount. So at the end of the year, we can hold them accountable that this is the progress. So in these issues that you are raising about the GNU, there is most of these issues, the GNU has not tabled baselines in front of us to say this is the baseline. Sort of, for instance, if we're to say unemployment is 12.2 million when we start this year, at the end of this year, we're going to reduce it by 2 million. Come hell or high water, we'll reduce it by 2 million. So what I have often indicated to the comrades is that, comrades, you misunderstand us. We are not criticizing you that we have not done anything. The problem is that you don't do enough. You are not unlike the young man who does 1 push-up a day and hope to be a Springbok. Yes. So they do a little something that is of little consequence, and they want to be praised. But when you look at the overall picture, the picture is getting worse.
Absolutely. You mentioned foreign policy, and I think that has been a surprise to many, because again, we were told that if the ANC and the DA came together, then our foreign policy, at least our foreign policy as it relates to the West, would be stabilized. But in actual fact, I mean, we're seeing some of the worst foreign relations that we've ever seen, at least in democracy, with the US. We've got AfriForum jumping and hopping from country to country. And we're in a very tight spot now with all that's happened with the expulsion of our ambassador. How are you reading particularly the US relationship at the moment under this GNU?
I think that we have a big problem. And in my judgment, the reading of the game, and I know that some people might say it's old-fashioned, but the reading of the game by Rasool, to my mind, is correct. And the correctness of his reading relates also to his expulsion, because he actually called the spade what it is. The understanding of white South Africans, of the US, and of Europeans for that matter, of the US, there's a very terrible and frightening view of what the US is. So when they talk to you, if you are Cyril Ramaphosa of the ANC, there must be an understanding between you and the white South Africans, that if you don't agree to this, we can set the dogs of the US on you. Right? So if you are a Latin American and the US asks you to do something, if you don't do that thing or behave in a manner that satisfies the Americans, they'll set the dogs on you. I mean, coming in here, I was reading what they are planning to do with Venezuela. Even if you thought you are a friend of the US, they will want to remind you that you are not an equal, by the way. You remember Keir Starmer, when he said this is an old relationship, and then Trump turned around and asked, can you take Russia on your own? Can you do that? So you are hiding behind me. I'm your big brother. I'm protecting you. Now you want to tell people we are equals. But within that, Sizwe, you'll forgive me for highlighting this. Within that, there's the element that certain people who are not who are not considered to be part of the Western Christian civilization must be made to understand that they need to subordinate themselves to this worldview, right? And J.D. Vance makes this when he corrects the Europeans from his perspective, that you cannot have a Western Christian civilization in Europe by admitting all these foreigners from Asia who have different views, different beliefs. They are going to water down your white Christian Western civilization. And in America, they are making an example. Well, how do you go about doing this? These superfluous people who are not white, who are not of proper European extraction, who cannot be identified as components of white European Christian civilization, must be removed from the United States so that the civilization, as J.D. Vance and company see it, is actually maintained clean. So that view of purity will then come to South Africa and say, perhaps let's have a geographic area, a terrain at least, because these people are just too many already, only 7% of the population. Rather, why don't we get Cape Independence or some respectable territory where we can have an enclave of white Christian civilization on the African continent? So to me, there can be many excuses that are given and many explanations that are given. But the greatest difficulty you're going to face in any engagement is if you are seen as a rebel who does not want to subordinate himself fully to the view of this white Christian European civilization. That is now the biggest challenge. And we are not going to run up and down and say, I'm a communist, I'm a socialist, I'm a Muslim, I'm this or the other. Even if you were to say that, but we're going to give you a script. So the other civilization that is there, that they are going to struggle to subordinate, and they know it's older than their civilization, it has survived many vicissitudes, it's China. It's not a white Christian civilization. But it is, without doubt, a great civilization. The civilization of call it the Babylonians, I would put it, where is it, Iraq and so on, that history there, they've destroyed it with bombs. They are now chasing the Persians in Iran, and so on and so forth. So, when I was thinking about this concept of civilizations, because the older civilizations are not European civilizations, but this youngster called the United States, in terms of civilization, now is wanting to lead civilizations that are older than themselves and to bully them and subordinate them. So these are the difficulties that are there. So sometimes you may sit with Steenhuisen, if you are Cyril Ramaphosa, and at a certain stage he might want you to recognize that aspect, that it comes from this superior civilization.
What did you make of the return of Ambassador Rasool? Because I was quite impressed by the number of people that turned out, or at least surprised, let me say. I mean, I haven't seen the ANC mobilizing in the Western Cape like that for a very long time. And what I think many people are failing to appreciate is that there is going to be a certain backlash to this very aggressive US position on South Africa. And that's going to bring out those who don't like that South Africa is being pushed around. And I think in some ways we saw that with Ambassador Rasool's return, where you had a very big turnout of people who don't maybe have the media megaphone that the AfriForums have. But there's clearly a lot of public dissatisfaction with the way that he was unceremoniously booted out.
Sizwe, it's a very emotional point really for me, because as we were growing up as student activists and all that, the Western Cape was actually very strong. And since 2009, there has been a watering down of the various schools of thought. I mean, you've studied these things, your New Unity movement and all. It was a very strong leftist movement there. So when you went there, you met with quality.
Sure.
And since 2009, also with the sidelining of Rasool, by the way, from the structures of the ANC, the Western Cape became terrible, really terribly weak, and defeated by the DA left, right, and center, and one mediocre after another taking over the leadership of the Western Cape. Now, that weakness that has been created in the ANC generally, I think with the termination of Rasool in the manner that he was terminated, reminds people that we have actually living enemies. Your petty squabbles are opening very big doors to destroy even the best amongst us. And I count Rasool as one of the finest sons of the soil in South Africa. And his return to South Africa, I hope the senior leaders will understand that this is not an opportunity for them to send them to Indonesia or some other place. It actually needs to return to the Western Cape, to mobilize the grassroots of our people, to turn the tide against the AfriForum, and I think is capable of that, against the Cape Independence Party, Solidarity, and all the agents of Make America Great. And if we were to steal a term from Joel Nechitenze, Rasool can be a powerful instrument as well to defeat the Make Apartheid Great Again. Because these movements, that is, this insurgency that he talks about, these are the plans, the implants in South Africa to undermine the incumbency, the ANC, the mass democratic movement, and the forces of the left. And they've been sleeping. And to me, Rasool is now the sharp point of our spear as the indigenous peoples here and the black majority. So to me, it is not about him getting other Mercedes-Benzes and business class flights and all that. If he were to be used for national interest, it would be to rebuild the Western Cape that has been taken over by gangsters. And I think I might as well mention this. When you look at the Western Cape, which is the hometown, the home province of Rasool, the BER, Bureau of Economic Research at Stellenbosch, when they assessed the labor figures, the unemployment figures at the end of last year, you look at these numbers from 30-year assessment of this. The Western Cape actually grew unemployment the largest in South Africa. From 5%, basically they were at full employment in 1994, to 22%. So when you just take that, it's a 344% growth of unemployment. And if you just take a simple division of, you say, okay, they've moved from 5 to 22, it's more than 4 times that they've actually worsened unemployment. And they often say that the DA is the best performing. But when I assessed the city of Cape Town, I discovered that in terms of people who've completed tertiary education in the Western Cape, Cape Town more specifically, it's about 11% for the colours, 11%, call it 11.6, those types, but let's call it 11% for the sake of this discussion.
Sure.
But the whites is 44%. Again, that number comes back that your whites are actually 4 times ahead of you. In the Western Cape, where the DA says they are doing the best for black people. So clearly, the DA is not really truly the solution on merit, not on measurable numbers. So our people, all of them, black and white, have got to be a little bit more humble about their abilities and their performance. And we need to cut out this propaganda that is out there where people distort everything. So if we were to write an exam and you get 15% and I get 10%, the pass mark is 50%. And
Sure.
you run all over town saying you're better than Sandile. What are you talking about? Because we're both failures actually. Now, so the DA has mastered the art of profiling itself as a success when it is a better failure.
How much do you think this GNU is likely to continue? Or I suppose another way of thinking about that is looking at this question of the budget and whether that will undermine this coalition. Because, I mean, if you can't agree on the budget, then, you know, that's usually seen as one of the key signs of the ill health of a coalition. And we seem to have these two partners who, as far as I can see, have not come to an agreement yet. The ANC seems to be hoping it can find partners along the way. That remains to be seen. But yeah, I wonder what you think of how this budget reflects on the stability of this coalition going forward.
My feeling is that the people who are in the GNU have seen the advantages of being in the GNU. The resources all of a sudden that you command to build your brand. So you can keep the GNU tottering along for the sake of building your brand. I don't know why a name like Gayton Mackenzie just comes to mind now. But I think if you look where he is now and the work that he has done in the communities in terms of mass mobilization, he has not done enough to deserve to be there. But now that there was a way for him to get in there, he's punching above his weight by being in the cabinet, and people who've got bigger support on the ground, outside.
Certainly, and his profile is elevated significantly.
Elevated. So I don't think there's anybody in the GNU, no matter what insult you can throw at them, that is likely to live there, because it's a nice platform that you go to the elections in 2026 and 2029 with all these resources, and you keep announcing this, you keep going over there at the expense of the state. So to me, the GNU is a place of opportunism right now. The negotiations, if we believe Fikile Mbalula with what he said, that the DA introduced a request, certain requests. One of them is that Godongwana must write something about expropriation, and there must be some form of guarantees. But now we know that there are no guarantees that are needed, because Standard Bank and Werksmans, the top one of the top lawyers, have announced that actually, from a mortgages point of view, property investment point of view, there is absolutely no threat that is going to come from the Expropriation Act. They are comfortable. So to me, the practitioners of investing in property are saying they are fine with this.
Absolutely.
So who is the DA to say this? There is no farmer in South Africa who is more invested in property than Standard Bank. There's none of them is there. So these are the real McCoys. So trying to use the budget, disagreements over the budget by the DA to leverage the ANC. In terms of hard facts on the ground, the ANC doesn't need to pay attention to that at all. So now the ANC itself can want to have its cake and eat it. Go to MK and EFF and say, guys, support me to pass this budget. You know, we're brothers, this, that, and the other, and so on. And then still go to bed with the DA. And this is where, to me, where the EFF and the MK says now, don't you think we also have needs? So that type of horse trading has got to happen. But I don't think there's anybody who is ready to leave the GNU right now. And that poses a problem even for Malema, who says, guys, if you come out, I'm coming in. And I think it's fair for him to say that. But what I want to say more than this, Sizwe, is that as I've been working through these debates, including the budget and the VAT debate, big business said that we must not use tax increases to move forward. Now, coincidentally, that is what the pro-poor lobby is also saying in South Africa, that there must be no tax. On top of that, the alternative school of economics, modern monetary theory or post-Keynesian, whatever you want to call them, are saying actually taxes are not really the most wise thing to be busy with. In the first place, you need to change your funding model for the state and your development model and so on and so forth. So if people were to be sober, we can agree to do the right thing, but all coming from different perspectives.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right?
Somehow the DA and MK agree on that one thing, that a tax increase is not the way to go.
Yeah. So what I thought about is, I was talking to some young professionals and students, and I'm saying, listen here, man. You see, what we now need is to address the intelligentsia in South Africa, not address the ANC and or one of them, everybody in the intelligence. You see, if you have a phone now, most of the phones on earth have got so many different brands, but they are all Android mostly, except for Apple.
Sure.
But the majority is Android. So if we could come to a platform of thought, which is the Android of South Africa, that whether you are in the PAC or PA or ACDP, there's at least a plug and play type of thinking platform. For instance, if we now agree that this idea of fiddling with taxes, I mean, VAT started back in 78 as sales tax at 4%. It's now at 15, going towards 16 if they approve this. Which problem did it solve? Why does it keep going up? So clearly there's something that this thing is not solving.
Yeah.
And so on and so forth. And when you look at the corporate tax side, which did come down, but we can fight with white monopoly capital, we can insult them, but when you look at the numbers, these guys have been consistently investing 2 times what the state is investing.
Sure.
Right? The profits of South African companies have actually built a lot of the productive infrastructure of this country. Even whether it was Zuma, Mbeki, in actual fact, when I looked at one report, where it started to be very shaky was under Cyril, to be honest with you, where you get some of these capital expenditures that now they are investing outside the country, they are returning money to shareholders and all this thing. So even under apartheid, our companies were building this country, the South African companies. So when it comes to the actual physical investment, you can get them there. They can argue with you whether you should subscribe to Fanon and whatever. Sure. But when it comes to the concrete work on the ground, they've been doing the work on the ground.
Dan, before we get back to the episode, we just want to let you know we have a big goal on this channel to build this community to 1,000 members. That means we have 2 new levels of SMWX membership. The first level gives you exclusive access to content, discounts on merch, but the second level, in addition to various other perks, gives you access to me. We're going to have meetups, online sessions. You're going to get discount on our live events. So if you want to deepen your SMWX community experience, help us get to that 1,000 member level. Look forward to seeing you there. What do you make of opposition in this GNU era? MK shot onto the scene last year. EFF had this crisis of leaders leaving. Now, members within the EFF, of course, say, well, that's not a big crisis for the party. It was just the exit of senior members, but they maintain they're doing fine.
Yeah.
But the EFF and MK in particular were in some ways isolated. Now, I know that the ANC says, well, we asked them to come in and all of that. But at the end of the day, a decision was taken to keep them out of this governing arrangement. What do you make of how they have performed in this GNU era so far?
I think I will start with the MK. For the fact that they are the official opposition.
Yeah.
For instance, now we're in the budget debate, let's call it that. A big one. In fact, probably the biggest since independence, since 1994.
Definitely.
the biggest problem during the 2024 election was the economy. So whether you are going to be in government or in the opposition, you need to have something very profound to say about the economy.
Yeah, yeah.
In the past, I spent a few casual moments but in serious discussions with one of the MK members, Dr. Tanti Mtandi. And I consider him to be one of the best thinkers in economics and finance that I have ever encountered. But that sort of power is not showing during these budget debates. I don't see MK coming with profound and serious suggestions here. So, which means that they have not configured themselves to package those punches that they should be throwing in a very focused way.
Sure.
Right? Similarly, the comments of the EFF during this budget process, I think they are very casual. For instance, now, Songezo Ozibi, I think it's the fiscal framework falls under him and so on. I mean, that thing is a structure of numbers that must relate to each other. Somebody needs to go through that to say, does this produce the eradication of poverty, unemployment, and so on, in a very systematic way? I commend them. I've seen the EFF at seminars with Badile Hutla, who's also one of the best.
Yeah.
But to now take that knowledge and apply it in Parliament in an intelligent way, and I must add this, that if you are a political activist, or let's call it that, and now you end up being elected, there is no part of Parliament and the cabinet that is not a serious job. So if you are in the opposition, you have a serious job to do. And I think those are the things that people, it's not enough to throw careless remarks at the GNU, throw careless remarks at Steenhuisen or Cyril Ramaphosa. No, you need to contribute to the stock of intellectual capital that this country can move this country forward. From your position as an opposition party, certainly these two, because they are the biggest, the MK and the EFF. And my view is that they have not decided properly to say what is going to be our contribution to the economic and finance cluster, etc., etc. And this is our team. And as I have said, I know at least one of them in MK that could make a big difference, but I don't see the impact. I mean, these are baby punches, like being punched by a 2-month-old baby. They are not throwing anything serious.
Sure. On the other hand, I think the foreign policy moment might open a window for these parties. I've seen them getting increasingly strident, and when I think of a coherent response, I think that's where they seem to be finding the most powerful response. I agree with you. I think on the economy, they haven't found the right punches to hit the GNU with yet. But foreign policy, I'm starting to hear them becoming a lot more coherent.
And that can also be explained because we grew up understanding the USA, and our relationship with the USA for the longest time was problematic, and the West generally, because they supported apartheid.
Yeah.
So to find reading material and some old cadres who can coach you what to say and quote from here and there should not be that difficult. So we can commend them there, because indeed I agree with you that actually the forces of the left are actually being revived by Make America Great Again.
Yeah, absolutely.
And then, interestingly, I mean, you then start to find Europe starting to recognize South Africa as a serious voice of the South. Now, and I was asked this question about the alliance between Europe and South Africa. I said, by the way, they may not all have been diligent enough to support the anti-apartheid movement, but we cannot run away that they made a big contribution in supporting the anti-apartheid movement, and especially the Scandinavian countries and so on and so forth.
Absolutely.
So others could benefit from the oiling of that relationship by those countries. And on top of that, I mean, and now this Baso guy, this professor at UJ, has now issued a report that in actual fact, the number one trading partner of South Africa is the European Union. China is number 2, USA is number 3. And I think that was an important contribution to clarify that. Because, America always claimed to be world champions in anything. So you do need to look at the data. So on that side, geopolitical side, and the things that are generally political, these two, MKP and the EFF, they will flow easily there. But our problems, yes, maybe there's still a lot to come in terms of problems in that arena. But on a day-to-day basis is hunger. What is hitting us is the hunger.
Absolutely.
So they have to come up to scratch with the economic solutions.
What do you make of President Ramaphosa's time in office? He's been president since 2018. Entered office on a wave of hope, Ramaphoria. I think that wave crashed, in my view. You can say what you think. But then we had another wave after the GNU. What do you make of his term in office?
If you look at the numbers over a long time, probably, you'd be tempted to go even back to 1960. I don't think there's a guy who has messed the numbers of South Africa more than Ramaphosa. The guy has been a total 100% disaster. I think to achieve a 0.6% GDP growth, it takes a special type. It really takes a special type. Let me give you an illustration of this. Maybe I don't know if it will help. When I was talking to these BMF guys yesterday about Northwest, the budget. The budget of Northwest is smaller than the budget of the city of Johannesburg.
Wow.
Right?
Didn't realize that.
Yeah. Now, the guy that you put in the city of Johannesburg, I don't know what the biggest car engine is, whether it's 24 valve or 12 valve, but it's something like that when you are at the wheel of Joburg. And term after term, year after year, he puts the one dud after another on this V8 or V12, whatever it is, high performance vehicle, economic vehicle. Panyaza Lesufi said his economy, the Gauteng economy, is larger than Western Cape and even if they were to combine with KZN, is still larger than them. That sort of language. But that is not the issue. The issue is the performance. And which performance? The growth rate and the fast, rapid reduction of the unemployment. So when you take the period, Zuma made a mess because his numbers are lower than those of Mbeki. One day I was speaking to Mavuso, I think Mavuso Msimang, he said, guys, I never thought anybody could do worse than Zuma. But this guy has excelled Zuma by far in failing. And I have raised the issue openly, and I will raise it here again, that Ramaphosa, on any level, is unsuitable to be the president of this country.
Wow.
You see, the comprehensiveness, maybe let me be a little bit more direct, maybe a little bit more brutal. You see those guys were fiddling around the DRC there. They were saying they are doing peacekeeping and then they get beaten up. And I've been told that our soldiers are now surrounded there. Now, this is my take on it. We will accept the political denials. But none of them, including Ramaphosa, in terms of ability to organize the state and to organize war, comes anywhere close to Kagame, Paul Kagame, in terms of ability. So, this is like taking a standard 10 boy and making him to fight with kindergarten. So, as a military leader for South Africa, I would score him at about 2 out of 100.
Wow.
On economics, I can't give him more than 5%. Right? Now, he has started this engagement with the United States. And I agree with the engagement. The ICC case, the ICJ case, I agree with that. But I'll tell you a little story about this. When I used to be a rugby player there in the Eastern Cape, so I had a deputy captain. I was the captain, I had a deputy captain. So he had this story one time that, guys, and I didn't like players fighting. Rugby players can be, and I didn't like my players fighting. So the deputy captain, my deputy captain says, guys, don't worry about the issue of fighting. I know how to start a fight. My only problem is how to finish it. And that is Ramaphosa for me. You cannot start a fight that you don't know how to win. When you don't know what's your strategy for winning, people may look at you that you are at a great disadvantage, but they don't know your strategy. They will see you beating a giant. Giants can be beaten. The Americans ran from Vietnam. They can be beaten. I believe they left some of their equipment in Afghanistan. So they are able to run. But they need a superior thinker. And I am not sure whether Ramaphosa is a superior strategist. Even Trump is rough, is all over the show. But if you are intelligent, you can catch him and choose your punches carefully. Yeah. I am not confident that the comrades have started a fight that they know how to win exactly. They are hoping to God that something will happen. And you don't fight like that. There's a number of issues. I went to address a meeting down in Midlands, actually, about education in this country. When you look at the statistics, and Padile Hutla commented extensively on this, that when you look at the proportion of graduates, black graduates, as a proportion of our population versus the white graduates as a proportion of their population, the white population. So they are now 6 times in essence, in percentage terms, more educated than us. And we were better. We're almost 1-to-1 in 1994. So the comrades have cannibalized those things. When you go into history, for instance, one of the things, church history, the mission schools, you go to KZN, students from the black schools being tested with the same test to benchmark against, and they were equal, and at times the black schools were better, right? So going into the 70s, the 80s, we were on par with the whites. Under the independence, we've fallen out because you need a minimum percentage of intellectuals in your community to move ahead in life. And that goes hand in hand with the fact that, you'll forgive me for this, that I regard the ANC as an intellectual desert. There's been a desertification, intellectual desertification in the ANC. And that desertification has moved into our townships and our villages, where we have not produced enough graduates to carry this economy. The graduates that are there, even those that are not being used optimally on a daily basis. So I have nothing to commend Cyril with. I cannot recommend Cyril to lead anything. My view is that he should go back to his farm.
That takes us to maybe a final theme, and that's the question of ANC succession itself, because we're entering a moment now where Tokyo Sehwale said to me, President Ramaphosa is in the departure lounge, at least in the ANC. And the party will now then have to think, especially as we come up to the local elections and then 2027, which isn't that far away. What do they do? Because we know at the end of the second term of a president, that's where things get very dangerous for the ANC. We had Polokwane, we had Nazarek 1. And they find themselves in a difficult position in the ANC to the extent that this is the first elective conference where they don't go into it with a majority in the electorate. How are you reading the current succession story in the ANC now?
It doesn't inspire confidence. At best, I'm nervous. I took a look on the internet of the CV of Paul Mashatile, hoping that I could spot some achievements that could say this is a man of achievements. I then realized that I probably need a longer period of time to look, to find them, because they are well hidden. So Mbalula's bumbling is well known. Nomvula. In that top 7 and in the NEC itself. And one has got to be very humble when you say these things. But what is difficult is to find genuine, well-developed talent that you can say we have confidence.
We've almost forgotten what that feels like in South Africa, where you have confidence in your leadership.
Exactly. We have almost forgotten. And I'll tell you something that is emotional for me in this. You know, there are some people that I looked at, and I may not mention names because names can be controversial in this particular instance.
Sure.
But I've looked at them and I felt comforted that I think that it was inevitable that we would win the struggle against apartheid. When I look at the caliber of the comrades who were on our side. That made me to feel that we were a good match for our opponents. At this juncture, I do not have that confidence. And even if I were to see some of them who are talented, they are far removed from the opportunity to govern.
Yeah.
So, and this is the type of people that since 2009, the ANC electoral support has been declining consistently. These are people who are able to observe something going wrong and getting worse and tolerate it and not correct it.
Yeah.
The city of Johannesburg has been deteriorating.
Yeah.
Cyril has been there. This is his hometown. Come from my homeboy, born from Soweto. The thing is deteriorating, nothing getting done. Right? So the spirit is that you can look at things getting wrong, getting worse, and never take action. And to me, that is the challenge of this coming election of the ANC. But bear in mind that the votes now are no longer sitting there waiting for the ANC. Shortly, we will be having to do predictions. But at the rate these guys are going, they are going to get hit on the chin.
Yeah.
Big time. So that was what I would say, that the problem is quality in the ANC. It remains quality, starting with the president.
If there's one thing you would change about South Africa right now, what do you think it should be?
I think if I were to use a word that has been abandoned, it's this word that is called productivity. Whereby a person knows that they have not worked until they've produced the result that is needed. Your activity is not productivity. No matter how hard you've tried, if you have not produced what was needed, you have not worked, you have not done anything. productivity, you can be an unemployed graduate in the township. Students are struggling with maths. Why are you not volunteering and improving that mathematics in those schools? Your township and your village is dirty or short of one thing or the other. You are going to sit the whole day doing nothing rather than seeing what you can do to clean up this place and make it better. This idea that this country is going to be built by us with our own hands, that we must know what an overall is, we must know what a spanner is, what a shovel is, what a pick is. This notion that you are here on this earth to create and to produce something worthwhile for human society. And I don't care which party you are talking about in South Africa, this idea of productivity is lacking. The only thing we can do is to be big mouths and praise ourselves that we're hot shots, but when it comes to measurables and deliverables, we're not there.
Well, Mr. Sandile Swana, it's been a great honor to have you on SMWX. Thank you for sharing your views with such forthrightness and strength. And I hope this is the first of many conversations. I know we spoke on the SABC many times, but it's great to have you on the podcast, and I hope we can welcome you back in the not too distant future. Enkosi Tata. Thank you for watching. Like, share, subscribe. Help us reach 250,000 subscribers, and keep it locked on SMWX. Aye.